Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Saints and Sages. I am Shannon, and I am joined by Liam and Sean again. Thankfully, this is our March video. Happy St. Cuthbert's Day to all of those practicing. And today, Liam is our primary reader. Finally, I guess, the long-awaited return of Liam and his great knowledge, which he will bestow upon us. Sean will probably contribute to some extent as well. I'm not sure how much I will contribute. And also, I apologize for my background. I mean, I don't have the best background to begin with, but I also am in the process of moving. So that explains that. But at least Liam also has a new background, actually. He just switched rooms in his house. Sean, is that a new background for you?
Same one you've seen every month.
Okay, well, at least someone's consistent. So either way, welcome back. And I don't know if anyone else has anything to preface with before we get into it, but if not, we can give it over to Liam.
Okay, no prefatory material. Well, we can talk about St. Cuthbert then. And hopefully I don't talk too much, but I do have a good amount prepared. So St. Cuthbert, he is the patron saint of Northumbria. He's a rather important early English saint. I know we kind of talked about one already with Edmund the Martyr earlier a few months ago, but Cuthbert, while not quite, I would say, at a status ever of really being like a patron saint of England, he's pretty dang close. He's almost like as close as you can get without actually getting there. In fact, he is up until like modern times, essentially, when a certain dissolution happened. He's important. So we're going to talk about him today. So Cuthbert is associated early in his life with Melrose, which is coming from a Maulros, which means barren promontory or something like that, which is would be on the River Tweed, and that is where Melrose Abbey is actually rather new when he ends up going there, and I believe it was founded by Saint Aidan, shortly before Cuthbert was ends up there, or born even. He was probably born in 634. He died on March 20th, 687, hence why his feast day is today. And just note that 627 was the year Edwin of Northumbria converted. So this is a very young Christian kingdom, which is to say it probably wasn't very Christian at all. By decree, maybe Edwin said, we're a Christian nation now, but I would imagine most people were not, right? This was during the time of Theodore and his reforms in the church on Britain and whatnot. But this is an early church, right? That he is preaching to people who do not know Christ, right? Or maybe if they do, they don't know him very well. He was actually brought up in the ways of Celtic Christianity, which makes sense of how far north he is, right? We talked about Mungo already. At the time in early English history, as before England existed, you have essentially two branches, right? You have the Celtic Christianity, and you have the Roman Christianity traditions. I don't know, Sean, do you actually know like the kind of what they talked about at the Synod of Whitby?
I know, two of the main issues they were trying to resolve was a date for Easter.
Right.
The Celtic and the Roman traditions had two different ways of calculating that date. And also the way in which they did monastic tonsure, so the way they cut monks' hair. There is no clear, definitive answer of how the Celtic tradition did it, but
Right.
Some say there was maybe a band kind of cut across the top of the head, maybe like the front or the back was shaved. But the Roman one that we still can see today in many monastic traditions was kind of the crown, the top of the head shaved, leaving kind of a full crown around. So that was one of the kind of two of the main issues that were discussed, trying to kind of get everyone on the same page as to how they were practicing things.
Right. Yeah. That from what I understand, yeah, that's my understanding. And I've looked really hard actually on what that tonsure, the Celtic tonsure, looked like. But yeah, it seems like it's not quite known. There's some guesses, but
yeah, some guesses, some theories, but there's really no definitive answer that I know of.
Right. So there is a rather important synod of Whitby, I believe presided over by Hild, Saint Hild, or Hilda, depending on how you want to say it. Hopefully we'll cover her at some point in the future. Whitby is actually a later name. That's actually you can tell by the by ending, that's a Norse name. The Old English name is Strenos Halch. So Hal meaning like a hawk, so like a nook kind of. So some guy's nook of land. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. But so his one of his early teachers is Atta of Hexham. If you actually have read Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, who names all of his human characters after obscure saints, there's an Atta who appears early in the book, in chapter 1 even. So Atta, I have no clue how to say his name. Atta, I'm just kind of vaguely saying it as an Anglo-Saxon way. But yeah, so he seems to readily adopt the Roman rite. It doesn't seem to be a problem for Cuthbert, at least as far as we're told, essentially. So he also, again, like I mentioned, he preached in the time of the first conversion. Many would have still been pagan. I mean, the name pagan refers to the countryside, so the people outside of the centers of power. And I mean, heathen means the same thing too. Heathen just means like of the heath, right? Essentially. And we have some early miracles. I think, Sean, you are also familiar with these. I know. So one of them is he was told, essentially, I think I heard a couple, depending on who would tell him. So that either way, there's a story where he was told that he would be bishop, and so he should act accordingly, essentially, when he was a child, essentially, right, and doing childish things. There's a story I read also, I think it's in Alfrich, maybe elsewhere, where he is also, when he's younger, he has an injured knee, and someone, like an angel, some random person just like walks up and says, hey, get certain like kind of milk, I think, and wrap your wound, essentially, or whatever, this way. And that worked. That healed his knee. There's this rather famous one, right, where he prayed. There's these monks being drawn out to sea, and he prays, and they are returned to land safely after his prayer. But the thing that was big on his, you can almost say, conversion and getting him to enter into the monastery life is that he saw a vision of Aidan after his death, on the night of his death, being welcomed into heaven. Some stories say while he was shepherding, this is what he saw. And so after this last, then he was accepted at the monastery of Melrose under the prior of Boisel. I don't know if I actually mentioned it in the slide, so I'll mention it real quick, but on the map here, he is associated with his early life with Dunbar, which is up on the north here by the Firth of Forth, and then Lauderdale, which is really close to Melrose. You can see Melrose on the bottom of this map, kind of on the left. And so I'm not exactly sure if we know exactly where he's from. But at the time, this would have been Northumbria. Modern day, actually, I think all of these are in Scotland in our current year. So I didn't skip one, did I? Oh, okay, I did. My mouse double clicks. Anyway, so this is a photo actually of where old Melrose would be. It's what we call it. The Melrose of Cuthbert and Aidan and whatnot is old Melrose. There is a newer Melrose, which is not new. It's from the 12th century. It's also in ruins. This one has essentially nothing left. I don't know if there's ever been like archaeological digs on it. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't even made of stone, so I don't even know what they would find. But you can see this is the barren promontory, essentially, that it seems to be referring to. I think this photo is actually taken from, it's called like Scott's View or something like that. And I think it appears in other stories, but not in Cuthbert's. So this is said promontory where Melrose would be. I think there's like a cottage there now or something that owns the land. And so Lindisfarne, though, is another place he is commonly associated with. So Lindisfarne is called Medcaut in Old Welsh, which Andrew Breeze, who's a good scholar, suggests that this is probably from Latin Medicata Insula, which would be healing island. In Latin, I've seen it recorded as Insula Sacra, which means holy island, which is a common name for it today. And then the English name is more unclear exactly what it means. Maybe it means the island of the travelers to and from Lindsay, or maybe it's from Old Irish, or maybe from a Brythonic language. It's not that's why that name was a bit harder to parse. But Lindisfarne is essentially where he is associated later in life, and that he's actually in particular associated with an anchorite cell near Lindisfarne, though he will spend some of his time as Bishop of Lindisfarne. And so this is actually a map of Northumbria at the time, vaguely speaking. I mean, who knows how accurate it is exactly, but we can see this area near Bamber, actually. How you say that? Do you know, Sean? I don't know how. Okay, I don't know how they say it. You never know unless you look it up. I know it's Edinburgh, right? But Lindisfarne's right over here, right? You can see it. It's not actually on the map, but it's like right there or something. So pretty close to this important kingly side at the time. So the thing is that we're not exactly sure if he was even a noble or if he was a peasant or what exactly. I mean, some things seem to point that he was a peasant. I mean, shepherding seems to be a peasant's job. Some things seem to point to that he was a noble, right? We have miracles of him recorded coming to Prior Boisel with his horse and with a spear, right? So seemingly that he served in the military, right? In fact, we have that mentioned here, right? So he may be even related to King Alfred. But essentially one source, I believe, or a couple sources say that he was enlisted by King Oswald to defend Bamberg Castle. And then after some years at Melrose, he became guest master at the new, Ripon? I don't know how to say this. Sorry, English people, correct me. But monastery, which was led by Atta. Then after 662, he became prior at Melrose, and at 665, he became prior at Lindisfarne. So in 676, though, he became a hermit at either St. Cuthbert's Island or at St. Cuthbert's Cave, which are both near Lindisfarne, before moving to the Inner Farne Island. And he initially accepted visitors, but later he only met with Alflad, who would later succeed St. Hild and Whitby. And in 684, though, he became Bishop of Lindisfarne. They had to beg him. That the Vitae are very clear about this, that he really did not want to be bishop. He wanted to remain a hermit. And I think the initial offer was actually to originally be bishop of maybe it was like Hexham or Ripon and Lindisfarne, and eventually they're like, okay, you can have Lindisfarne and Atta will become the bishop somewhere at the other part, right? Because he didn't want to leave Lindisfarne, or at least he wanted to be near it. So, but he doesn't stay in this position very long. He retired in 686 to return to his hermitage, and he died shortly afterwards. I think in 687. I think I mentioned that earlier. So, he's very, very concerned with his hermitness. He wanted to be a hermit, which is understandable. So, how many did I skip? Jeez. Okay, this is getting obnoxious. There we go, my mouse. So we have some things that are commonly associated with him. We have his, this Cuthbert's cross here on the top right. So in 1826 or 27, sorry, when his coffin was open, an early Anglo-Saxon cross is found with St. Cuthbert. We have found other crosses of a similar make. In fact, if you are subscribed to my Alfred Tomwood project, the logo is of a very similar cross. It's not Cuthbert's, but it's from a bed burial near Cambridge. And so it's a beautiful gold garnet piece, Celtic design, often associated with early Anglo-Saxon England. We also have St. Cuthbert's Gospel, which is the Gospel of John. This is actually the oldest Western book binding that we have. It is rather old. It's from shortly after his death to be placed in his coffin. So it is rather impressive. It's actually rather beautiful, considering how old it is. It's nice, the condition it's in. And the reason its condition is so nice is because it sat in his coffin untouched for several centuries. So it's nice, and some relics stay with the body. I don't know why I put this here, but another thing associated with him is Cuddy's Well, which is in Bellingham, UK. We have 3 miracles recorded with this well with the medieval cult of St. Cuthbert. They're actually recorded in the 12th century by Libellus of Reginald of Durham. What the heck? And they concern a guy named Sproch. I have no clue how to say his name. Anyways, a poor but pious man employed as a bridge builder by the almoner of Durham. In the first miracle, after Spruch's daughter Etta stays away from the church to sew a dress on the feast of St. Lawrence, her left hand becomes paralyzed, clutching the dress. She is miraculously cured by an apparition of St. Cuthbert after drinking water from the well. In the second, on the occasion of Etta's marriage, Spruch's cow is seized in payment by a bailiff of the local lord and placed with another tenant, whose house is later struck by lightning. The cow is miraculously spared. And the third, a thief called Walter of Flanders and his accomplice, who have stolen Spruch's axe, are fatally attacked by the head and the handle of the axe. So interesting, almost folk stories we have associated here with Cuddy's Well, or St. Cuthbert's Well, which is just a natural spring. You can see it here in this picture. And it makes sense. I mean, it would be associated with Cuthbert. I'm not sure if it was originally. It probably wasn't, if I were to guess, but a later association is not a bad association. And then we also have some pictures. Here's actually the incipit for St. Cuthbert's Gospel. You can see it here. Remember, in the beginning was the Word, right? You can see that in principio erat verbum et verbum erat. Oh gosh, Domine is the nomen sacrum. So everyone knows the beginning of John, right? Anyways, and we also have a stained glass window of Cuthbert. I will say and point out that the most distinguishing icon of Cuthbert is him holding someone's head, and that's how you know it's Cuthbert, because he's holding St. Oswald's head, whose relics are taken with Cuthbert's relics after Cuthbert dies. We'll talk about that in a minute, but so it's Cuthbert with Oswald. So the attestations, actually, we have some interesting stuff. So just like we have the oldest Western book binding, 8th century, early 8th century, being Cuthbert's Gospel, we also have the oldest surviving Anglo-Saxon piece of hagiography is the life of Cuthbert, the anonymous Vita Sancti Cuthberti, right? We also have Bede talks about this guy a lot. He wrote a prose life of Cuthbert. He wrote a verse life of Cuthbert. He talks about him for, I think, 20 chapters 27 to 32 in Bede's Ecclesiastical History, Book 4. I read those here in my copy. Alfred of Ensham has a homily on him, I believe, in the second series of homilies. And there is even an 11th century work, the Historia de Sancto Cuthberto. So Cuthbert is rather popular. He's getting a lot of work. I mean, if Bede is writing poetry about you, then it must be pretty important. Now, Bede is from essentially the same time, actually. Bede is up in Wearmouth, Jarrow, which is nearby. And Bede would have been maybe about 15 years old, even, actually, when Cuthbert died. So he may have known Cuthbert. I mean, it seems like that was the case, actually. So, hey, what do we got next? We got some of his miracles. Okay, you guys want to talk about him, since I've just been talking over and over and over again? And this is some, because he's got so many.
So yeah, we have miracle of warm bread falling from the thatch on his horse pulled down in a desolate cottage. We have an eagle providing a fish for him and a young monk on the Tweed. Lo, Almighty God can very easily provide for us through this eagle, who of yore fed Elijah through the swamped raven. And while praying at the sea, 2 sea lions came and dried his feet and kept him warm.
Yes. That one in particular, I believe the last one is reported by someone else, and he essentially says he spies this other monk looking at him. He's like, "Hey, don't tell anyone," or whatever, until after I die. And so that's essentially when the story entered the myth.
I guess I can keep going. The thing is, like, I don't really know any of these. I didn't do my reading. I didn't do my homework. I apologize.
Shame.
But I know. Shame on me. Where's my dunce cap? But I must have packed it already. But I guess it's been a trend with lots of the saints we've been going over, is that there have often been a million miracles attributed to them. And we often are just mentioning a few. Some of them might feel more likely than others, and some of them like are later additions than others, like after his death. Because I guess you can't have Saint Cuthbert confirm or deny the sea lions necessarily, but either way, it's curious. But he also raised the boy from the dead at Exenforda, whatever that is. I probably just said that wrong too, but those ones are the stuff like raising people from the dead. Okay, I mean Christ does this several times, and other people do this, other saints. But it's a like you have to really. I don't feel like that's something you can easily trick people into thinking. If someone's dead, then they're dead, right? And it's not something that I think people would say lightly. But I mean, so I'm assuming if that one has been attested for all this time, that's probably accurate. And at least that's pretty significant. It almost is like it's just you threw it in the middle of this list, like it's just no big deal. Like it's the same thing as getting some bread, but I don't think it is. But either way, I guess they're both miraculous in that regard. But that okay is awesome. And then the curing the wife of her madness by faith, commanded ravens to depart. I mean, ravens are cool, I guess. But then grew barley out of season. That's actually nuts, especially considering how important the growing season would be to the lives of people. I mean, it's people don't think about this these days. Growing seasons usually, unless they have a garden.
That would be on his anchorite cell too. So he's growing barley on it at his cell.
Yeah, but that's pretty wild. And then log for a house. That one, I don't know what that means. What do you mean by this?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So essentially, I think it's again at his anchorite cell, but he needs to build the cell. And so the monks, he says, oh, bring a log. And the monks don't come with the log. And so he's praying and the log just washes up on the island. So.
And then he traded the log for one of the monks. So he took the log out of the water and pushed one of the monks into the water and said, have this one. That's useless. And then, okay. And then Angel Welcomes by Cuthbert in Rippon. I don't know. 3 heavenly loaves. That's like liturgical. That seems super liturgical and like I don't know. That one's curious. I wonder if there's more information about that one. But either way,
that one's interesting because I remember Ripon or Ripon, whatever the heck it's called, that he's the guest master. So he's just welcoming someone. He's just doing his job, right? I mean, like, and then he gets rewarded with 3 heavenly loaves, right? The person disappears and he got loaves.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know if someone welcomed me at Walmart. I don't give them anything. But
a welcome is actually like, here's a place to stay. We'll provide you food.
It's not the same. Like it's a hospitality thing, which again would be very important in more, I guess, deadly, less trustworthy times.
I mean, it's a very common in pre-modern times. Just, I mean, probably for thousands of years, right? Just like it's kind of a system of reciprocity almost. So. Yeah.
Okay. And then also found to be incorrect.
11 years after his death.
Yeah, it's amazing how many saints we have who, one of the major miracles that kind of starts building up their cult is the fact that their bodies are found incorrupt. And I think that's really one of the main things that really led to a cult growing up around him was the fact that his body wasn't decaying. It was still intact 11 years later. And this is something we see all throughout Christian history. And we have modern day saints. Saints that died within the lifetimes of people still alive today whose bodies are incorrupt.
Right. And it's stuff you can actually watch. Like, you can see pictures of it. That's honestly really uncanny. I'll be honest. Because, like, when people associate this with just a medieval or, late ancient time period, right, it's easy just to be like, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I'm never going to see this body. Like, obviously that's fake, or whatever. But, like, I have seen some pictures, right, of, like,
I've seen in person.
Recent ones. Yeah, I haven't seen any in person, but, like, and it's quite the experience. But yeah, just to get through these real quick. At his tomb, a brother was healed of paralysis. Another had his diseased eye cured. There's a story also where a man comes and is like, "Hey, my wife is mad. Essentially, she's going to die, right? And so come and perform last rites. No, send someone." And Cuthbert says, "I'll go myself. And by the way, she'll be fine." And he gets there, and they just have dinner together. And then also the commanding the ravens to depart thing, like bothering him at his hermitage and bothering his crops and stuff. And he's like, "Hey, if you were not given permission by God to be here and eating these crops, then depart." And they fly away. And then two come back, I think, and they apologize, and so he lets them live with him. And so they're pretty cool stories. I'm gonna be honest. You guys should read them. Anyways, that's just some. That's really just a tasting. He's got a lot associated with him. So I wanted to talk about his character. I sent two of these to Shannon and Sean so they can read, one or two. Actually, these are three, so there's five in total. But I didn't put two of them on here. But real quick, Alfrich in his homily, if I will say, maybe Shannon, if we could put like stuff in the description, if they could go read Alfrich's homily themselves if they want to, because it's available. You don't even have to borrow it on archive.org. But Alfrich is really short, which is why I say it's an easy one to read. So verily the Almighty had given him a sweet eloquence for people's instruction, and men could not hide their minds from him, but humbly confessed their secrets to him, and durst not do otherwise, and by his direction privily made atonement. So he's a good preacher, right? He brought people to penitence, right? Very important, right? Not just these miracles and historical facts about them. Alfrich also says that he was very wealthy for the poor, and needy always very impoverished for himself. Again, talking about the asceticism, particularly he's living as an anchorite, as a hermit, right, essentially, and that he doesn't have anything more than he needs, essentially. And then one last one I'll read from Bede. Bede describes him as a great orator, a good teacher. He taught others to do only what he first practiced himself. Above all else, he was afire with heavenly love, unassumingly patient, devoted to unceasing prayer, and kindly to all who came to him for comfort. He regarded as equivalent to prayer the labor of helping the weaker brethren with advice, remembering also that he who said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God," also said, "Love thy neighbor." His self-discipline and fasting were exceptional, and through the grace of contrition he was always intent on the things of heaven. Lastly, whenever he offered the sacrifice of the saving victim of God, he offered his prayers to God not in a loud voice, but with tears welling up from the depths of his heart. It was very sweet to hear, I think, a very close account by Bede, who is venerable in of himself, describe these sweet things about Cuthbert. Okay, you guys have the other quotes?
Yes, it was also said that he cared for the poor, fed the hungry, clothed the naked, took in strangers, redeemed captives, and protected widows and orphans, that he might merit the reward of eternal life amid the choirs of angels in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ.
I like that one because it iterates just like because that's something that the one thing I don't want to get too far away from when you talk about people like this is Scripture itself, and what is something that Christ is very adamant on, right? It's caring for the poor, right? It's caring for fatherless and the widows and stuff like that, right? Okay, Shannon, you got the last one, the big one.
I got this. Okay. However, after a time, he accepted the bishopric. So talking about what you mentioned earlier. And though it is not in our power to narrate how he distinguished himself, yet it is nevertheless better to describe some part than to omit the whole. For he continued with the utmost constancy to be what he had been before. He showed the same humility of heart, the same poverty of dress, and being full of authority and grace, he maintained the dignity of a bishop without abandoning the ideal of the monk or the virtue of the hermit. In all these things he observed the teaching of the Apostle Paul to Titus, remembering that he said, "A bishop must be blameless as the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not quarrelsome, not given to filthy lucre, but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers."
Right. Yeah, those are both from actually that early anonymous life. So again, recommend you guys read the text. They're very touching.
Yeah,
So
we
I
can
think
definitely see a lot of similarities between all of these
mhm,
various quotes from Alfred, the anonymous life, and Bede. I mean, they're all, I think, really touching on similar concepts, similar attributes.
mhm. Yeah, I think honestly, it's very touching to have these accounts. Personally, I think it's wonderful, whether written in Latin, whether written in Old English, or whatever. That Cuthbert, I will say this: Cuthbert is very beloved. I don't know so much nowadays. I haven't been to Durham, right? But back then, he was very much beloved, right? And he was beloved for a good reason, right? He was a Christ-like figure to look up to. He was someone who, you know, healed the sick, literally, right, and helped the poor, right. And it says, right, Bede says that he taught others as he himself practiced, right. That he was virtuous, right, as the hermit, as idealistic as in a sense, held the ideal of the monk. So I don't know. He's someone I think that it's nice to have this wealth of information about him in some sense because I don't have to guess. Because for someone like Edmund, we actually have very little about him himself, and even Mungo, there's actually not a ton about him. So it's very nice to see all this stuff about
Yeah, I
Cuthbert.
mean, there are some saints that we know they lived sometime in the fifth or sixth century. That's about all we know, really.
Right, there's a ton. We just have like names practically. So because again, Cuthbert, I think we mentioned it before. Like essentially, these people are saints by popular vote, essentially, but they don't actually vote, right? I mean, the people venerate them. It's not like anyone in Rome saying, "Oh yeah, this guy's a saint." No, the people remember, right? The people he affected, right, and their descendants.
Yeah,
So
even modern times. I mean, modern saints start from local cults, people that knew the saints, people who start to. I mean, even within their life, sometimes we start recognizing their saintly virtues.
right, I will
And
say
then,
this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, and then the people that know him locally can really start promoting him as a saint to maybe people higher up or people in the greater church.
Right. I mean, it's good too because honestly, in my mind, there saints don't really take away, right? I mean, you only add to the glory of God. You don't take away from the glory of God. That's not possible, right? And so, I mean, like, remembering a saint, like that is in similitude of, the only begotten or something like that, right? In their miracles or in their service and their preaching or whatever, right? I mean, there's nothing hurtful about that. I did want to mention because I completely forgot somehow at the very beginning to mention what his name is. His name is Cuthbert, but in Old English, it's something like Cuthbert. Um, and this is a typical diathematic Anglo-Saxon name. They're not compounds, right? So the first part means couth. It's actually literally just couth, right? Like someone is uncouth. It means they're literally unknown, right? And I think the modern verb would be kaith, and that's like a Scottish verb, really. Um, and so couth bert, which bert is bright, right? So it's metathesis on the R. R is a liquid. It metastasizes really easy, so the R is switched to bright in modern English, but it was something like Bert in Old English, Bert, right? And so, like known brights, but it's not known brights. It's not known bright. It's not a compound. It's literally just two dithemes. We call it the prototheme and the deuterotheme. They're just two good things. That's essentially how most Anglo-Saxon names work. Like Alfrich here, we have mentioned Alfrich is a diathematic name. Bede is not. Beard is a single theme name. Beda just means prayer. What a great name. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that before I forgot again. So Cuthbert's Way, another thing just to mention is that we have a path from Melrose to Lindisfarne that is associated with Cuthbert. It's a pilgrimage path that you can take today. I believe it starts at the modern Melrose Abbey, not the old one, which I think actually makes you walk an extra mile because I'm pretty sure the new one's like a mile west of the old one. But this is one of the pilgrimages I really want to do. I want to be a palmer on my way across the Scottish border. Fair Lothian. Anyways, but
Yeah, that would be awesome.
so, Yeah, and it's not even that long. 62 miles, not that long. So the unfortunate thing about the U.S. is that we don't really have pilgrimages in a way. Like you could go on pilgrimage, but classically you go on pilgrimage and you're going to stay at churches along the way, right? They just let you sleep on their pews or whatever, right? We don't have that infrastructure in the United States or Canada or whatever, right? So can't do that, unfortunately. There are some places I wouldn't mind going on pilgrimage here, but I'd have to buy like a hotel every night or camp on the side of the road, which doesn't sound super fun, I guess.
We can do it.
We're going to one of these days. One of these days, Saints and Sages is going to have a pilgrimage version of the podcast.
Yeah,
Every
one of
day
these days
vlogs.
when we have like, 10,000 subscribers, so we can have funds to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. We all three don't
There's a
have
generous
most ideal
donor out there.
jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one you
Love to
hear
do
the most about is the Camino de Santiago in Spain,
Right.
and
That's a really popular one.
there's still a lot of infrastructure along the way, whether it's churches or hostels that cater to pilgrims, where you can stay. But there seems to be a bit of revival, at least in the UK, of some sort of pilgrimages. I don't know how much infrastructure is there yet, but there's definitely a revival in pilgrimage, and you see a lot of online and a lot of books kind of promoting the idea. I mean, there's the St. Magnus Way up in the Orkney Islands, and there are a variety of other pilgrimages related to saints where you can get a guidebook and follow these routes, whether it's on foot or by car or whatever ways means of transportation you can use now. So it's not entirely out of the question to do these with
Right.
modern technology.
I think I watched actually Luke Daly, who has a podcast, medieval podcast. I see him mostly post on LinkedIn. He's written some books. I believe he went on a little short pilgrimage and he like vlogged it for his YouTube channel. I'm not sure if I'm remembering correctly, but that sounds right.
Yeah, the Orthodox priest, Father Stephen Damick, and some of his fellow clergy went on a pilgrimage to many of these sites over in the UK and kind of did videos of their journeys and their travels to these.
Right. There's so many places. You literally your hike could just literally just like be a zigzag, and it would paint the entire island. I think honestly, there's so many. And we talked about in like Edmund, like at oh my goodness, Edmund Bury St. Edmunds, right? Popular pilgrimage site
Yes.
for the dissolution. You have Canterbury Tales talks about going to Canterbury for the shrine of Thomas Becket, right? Very popular. But maybe the most popular one in England, if I were to wager. Is there a pilgrimage to St. Andrews?
Yeah, I mean, St. Andrews by far was one of the most important pilgrimage sites in Scotland.
Understandably, a fossil.
Yeah, I mean, and the relics were brought there, I think, for that purpose to really build up the main cathedral of Scotland. While there are no remaining relics there today, I mean, there are routes you could take. I actually have a book which describes a pilgrimage route across life to St. Andrews. I mean, there are still many places you can follow, and I mean, there are guidebooks and websites that can kind of lead you along the way to St. Andrews.
And Sean has taken that pilgrimage by a plane. So, did you get in a horse and buggy?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, just.
No, I would have Sorry, we're not moving on. Because I think any pilgrimage would really be awesome. I feel like we could. I mean, Liam and I are both Mormon, so I feel like we could find some Mormon type pilgrimage we could make up here too. That would be cool. But I don't really care if it's like an old church that isn't LDS or whatever. But it would be really fun. In like a similar note, something I thought would be super fun would to do like a pilgrimage but via stagecoach across the American West, like Mark Twain does in Roughing It, something like that. Something about traveling with you have a nice, perhaps holy destination in mind, but also just the experience is very fulfilling, challenging, but fulfilling. It makes me think of like the closest thing I've ever done is I've been to scout camp, right? And we spent like 2 weeks hiking through the mountains, and it's amazing. Like it's awesome. It's hard, tiring. I smell funny
It's quite
by the end of
sublime.
it, especially, but like, yeah, it's there's something beautiful about it too. So character building,
Right. I
even
mean,
if you
it's
don't have
hard to
the
compare
religious
to
aspect.
something else. Yeah. Anyways, so we can continue then, I guess. Cuthbert's Way. I want to do it. So this is something I was actually only really made aware of, mostly from Alex Harvey's recent book, Little Kingdoms, which I did review on my other channel, one of my other channels. This is our channel here. Anyways,
Yeah, Liam talks too much. That's what you'll learn. Too many
yes,
channels.
it's true. I have too much to say. No one listens. No, I'm joking. So we have. I will point out before I forget, unless I put it on here on the page or there's too much text, to check it quickly. This is the oldest depiction of an English king that we have. Okay, this is Athelstan, and he is giving a gift to the cult of Cuthbert. So again, we have a lot of firsts associated with Cuthbert here. So the Holly Ware folk, though, which means holy man people folk, right? Literally, Ware is, man. Holly is holy. And it's associated with Chester the street. I don't know, and then Durham. And so in 793, as rather popularly known, but maybe not everyone knows, Lindisfarne was attacked. Okay, so and it was rather devastating. We'll talk about this a little more in a minute. But it was quite a blow to Western Europe, right? And it was attacked by Vikings. All right, they rolled up, and they decided to attack monks of all people. How nice of them. So in 830 or so some years after this attack, the relics and monks moved to Norham for safety, and in 875, Lindisfarne was almost completely abandoned. Not completely, probably, but almost completely, as far as like structure of this is of monks and stuff was concerned. And as Northumbria, essentially, the kingdom itself had collapsed under Viking onslaught at that point. Right, see the date in mind, right, as it relates to Edmund, we talked about a few months ago, 875 here. So these monks wandered for 7 years, carrying the body of Cuthbert with them and some other relics like Oswald's head. And Oswald's another saint we should talk about, but we're not going to be there today. So they wandered for 7 years before settling in Chester Street. And then in 995, so a while later, about over 100 years later, I guess, they moved to Durham, founding that place, particularly at Dunholm, where a woman's dun cow had wandered to after being guided by the saint. Supposedly, see below, that's on the next slide. So what's interesting here is that in the ashes of Northumbria, this at one point mighty kingdom, the center of English learning in a sense. In fact, the home of probably the most learned man of England, Bede at one point, Alcuin, who would become the head of Charlemagne's Renaissance, right? This once mighty kingdom was brought low, okay, by the Viking onslaught, okay? But the Holly Ware folk comes out of this, okay? Like the monks, even though they were the first ones attacked, essentially, in what we would call the Viking Age at Lindisfarne, they come out of it intact, right? In fact, as their own polity, right? A Roman kingdom led by Cuthbert's cult. In a sense, then, the followers of Cuthbert outlast the Vikings, who harried Northumbria and Lindisfarne itself, and they even outlast the Normans, essentially, right? I mean, this cult survives for a while, well past the point where we would distinguish between Normans and English. And I should mind, we don't really talk about it here, but there are texts talking about how, the cult of Cuthbert is affected because the Normans, when they end up conquering Anglo-Saxon England, they're not very nice to the north. They harry the north a lot. And so Cuthbert, he outlasts them all. And so we do have an interesting poem, actually, Durham itself, which is sometimes called the last Old English poem. It's written in the first decade of the 12th century. It's rather late. That's after the Norman Conquest. And at one point in here, I'll read the Old English because why not? You can tell actually it's rather late Old English. But no, there's the translation too. My translation. Anyways, Isin thera beauty. Ac barnum yekithid, der arfesta adi Cuthbert. Arthiath, Northumbrian man, late Northumbrian, Arthem arie in them minstra un arameder reliqua. Thar monia wundram ye worthath, this day rich sageth, mid thena drichnes, where domus bedeth. Interesting meter there. Definitely different than most Old English. It was rather late. So then that kind of translates so to there within that town well known to men, the honor fast blessed Cuthbert. There dwells among the blessed in the minster uncountable relics. There many wonders happen, as writings say. There the Lord's man abides judgment. And so again, we have this in my mind, this solid image of Cuthbert, right? He is solid in Durham. He is a solid saint for his cult, right? There his relics abide, and guess what? They're still there today. Okay, this poem was written almost 1,000 years ago. And so it's some nice continuity. I mean, we do talk about some of the struggles we have of just, I would say, we'll talk about that again at the end, essentially. But I just wanted to mention real quick the Dun Cow story of Durham. So this is from John Butcher. He says, east of Durham, the cart carrying the saint's body stuck fast in the mud of the roads. This is while they're traveling. And after 3 days of fasting and prayer, St. Cuthbert revealed that he wished his shrine to be at Dunholm, a place unknown. Then it was learned that a great crag in a loop of the river where was the place of the Dun Cow, lost and found. And here at the east end, St. Cuthbert was buried exactly where the Dun Cow had been found at rest. And here was built the present Durham Cathedral. Pilgrims to the shrine attested miracles, and each All Saints' Day the body was revealed, yet incorrupt. Hundreds of years later. And so again, I think this is powerful stuff. So this is one of the last things I think we'll cover. The last real thing. We have a couple pictures, but so one thing of Cuthbert defending his people, but again, some confusion of maybe sometimes we have the sense to question why God. But you guys want to, Shannon? Do you want to read the first one, and I'll see if this is makes sense.
Is that literally just the River Tees?
I think so, yeah. If I remember correctly.
Okay, I got you. Herring of the North, King William is traveling south on October 31st. With little respect for his new subjects, he says, certainly Cuthbert is not residing in Durham, and unless his body is found by morning, he would behead the local nobility and elderly. That night, he becomes exceedingly feverish and possessed to flee over 20 miles south to the River Tees. It rhymes a little.
Okay. Yes. This is my summary. But yeah, we have this little interesting anecdote of Cuthbert and William the Bastard, as he's aptly named here. It's William the Conqueror in most people's speech, but he was a bastard, by the way. He has this lack of respect for his recently conquered people, the people he's even now conquering in a sense still, right? He's got to establish his control, even already after being crowned. And just the disrespect, right? This fever, like Cuthbert sends this feverish dream, right? And he just flees in the middle of the night, just runs away. Over 20 miles. That's not a short journey. So it's very interesting. Again, that kind of gets into the ideas of the Normans, and Cuthbert. But anyways, Sean, do you want to share this last little bit? The last paragraph.
Yeah, so do the saints always provide protection?
Should be a question mark.
After the raid of 793, Alcuin wrote back home to Northumbria, saying, pagans have desecrated God's sanctuary, shed blood of saints around the altar, laid waste the house of our hope, and trampled the bodies of saints like dung in the streets. What assurance can the churches of Britain have if St. Cuthbert and so great a company of saints do not defend their own?
I am very sufficiently moved. I don't know about you guys. I just I think there's a lot of emotion, personally for me, in a lot of this stuff. But it's a good question to ask in some sense. Alcuin's not at home. He's not in Northumbria. He's at Charlemagne's court, right? Or nearby at least. And he hears about this devastating attack, and he's like, "What is going on?" Like, I mean, surely like Cuthbert can protect his people, so why not? I would say, though, we've already looked at it in a sense, and in my mind, Cuthbert did protect his people. Yes, the raid on Lindisfarne was terrible, you know what I mean? But it's still there today. That the cult of Cuthbert's still at Durham, right? I mean, like, it's survived, right? So we have this devastating stuff that happens, And it might not work, with fire and thunder or whatever as we would like it to, but there is hope, I think, in the end, at least. Okay. Any thoughts, guys? We only got one more page. It's just pictures.
I can agree with that. And eternally speaking, like, take care of, Cuthbert still got you. Like, I think in many ways we put a lot of credence on mortality. We are scared of death often, unfortunately, which is fair. I understand why that is, and I'm certainly guilty of that. I'm not ready to die. I don't think but at the same time, it's like with an eternal outlook, an eternal aspect. Being a martyr or having your possessions taken and being desecrated in some regards, it's not what we necessarily prefer, but like in the long run, it's going to be made right, correct? And so St. Cuthbert's still got you. It's not like these things are just over and done with because it looks bleak at the moment. So.
Yeah, looking at like Alcuin, he's down in Charlemagne's court. And this event, I think, really sent shockwaves around that world. Alcuin heard of it, and look at, I think his faith is even a bit shaken at this point. But, this is like one event that really eventually led to the Norse learning about Christ and receiving Christ and coming to Christ. So I think you can see it's all part of, I think, a greater plan.
Right. I think it's just I don't know. To me, it's really, there's just so much about the story of Cuthbert that is very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Very inspiring, and just encouraging, and hope fulfilling in a sense. I don't know. I very much enjoyed reading the texts talking about Cuthbert. There's a lot, relatively speaking, and it's encouraging. So again, hopefully I shared some of that with you. We did, hopefully. We it's not a one-person party, it's a 3-person party. But I did want to just end real quick again with some beauty. If you're watching the video on YouTube, that according to Aldred, later after Cuthbert's life, but that the Lindisfarne Gospels were made in Cuthbert's and God's honor. And the Lindisfarne Gospels are it is one of the most beautiful books I've ever seen. I'll be completely honest. And I've never seen it in person, but I've seen lots of pictures. I've looked at this digitized manuscript a lot. And it is absolutely phenomenal. And it does not surprise me that the person or the people making this had in mind Cuthbert, who would have been somewhat recently dead and still their patron. Anyways, that's all I have, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Liam. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody who's come come and watch the video and made it this far, especially if you have. Every video seems to take about an hour long. Maybe one day we will have a shorter video. But either way, hope it's worthwhile for everybody. We enjoy making them. I think I speak for all of us when I say that. But I appreciate the learning of St. Cuthbert. I didn't do as much reading beforehand as I should have, but I appreciate you enlightening me. There's a lot to learn from the lives of people like Cuthbert that I think can point us towards a more positive, more righteous, more holy life, which we could all use, I think, generally speaking. So anybody else have anything to say before we sign off until April?
Well, have a great St. Cuthbert's Day. Last year I had my children color some crosses of St. Cuthbert. I printed them out, black and white, and had them color that. They did not do the garnet and gold color design, but Let's
Wow.
let's hopefully Cuthbert's Day becomes memorable, if not to a ton of people, but to at least even one person, to remember a saint worth remembering, right? And someone that has been sanctified in a sense, and hopefully we can all be saints in a sense. I mean, even if you take the English word for saint is hollow, right, which is related to the word holy, and holy is related to the word holy. Okay, I'm not joking. Like WHOLLY is doublet with HOLY. So holy just means to be whole, and to be whole means to be healthy, right? Healthy is also related, and so or hale, right? And so hopefully we can also be whole, and we can be healthy, and we can be hale or whatever through the redemption and the redeeming blood of our healer, our Savior Christ. I'll leave you with that.
Amen. Thank you, brother. Okay. Sean will be primary reader next month. You won't want to miss that. You guys will be stuck with me in May, but we don't have to worry about that for just yet. By the way, thank you, Liam. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you guys next time on Saints and Sages. Thanks for listening and for watching.